6 months ago, I was a guest on a podcast. The next thing I know, I'm at the European Parliament in Brussels. How on earth did this happen? This was the moment that I truly understood the power of podcasting. A podcast is simply a tool to have deeper conversations with people. And having deep conversations builds stronger connections. It's when you have these deeper connections and conversations with people that you're able to open yourself up to unique opportunities like this. Here's how you can use podcasts to get opportunities without even having one yourself. So the first thing you need to do is find podcasts that are suitable and appropriate for you and what you want to achieve. So when I went on the podcast, which was a freelancing podcast, I didn't know that I would get the opportunity to speak at the European Parliament. It was literally just something that happened through doing a podcast. But when I look back, this was an amazing opportunity. And it's something that I could have orchestrated myself and could have actually, if I was strategic about it and didn't get this opportunity on accident, I could have made this happen for myself. And this made me realize one thing. If you want opportunities, all you have to do is knock on doors. And if you're getting no's, you keep knocking until you ask the right person and get a yes. So find podcasts that are hosted by your ideal clients, people you might want to collaborate with, people in your niche, and people who are doing what you want to do. Once you find these podcasts, follow them, listen to the episodes, listen to the type of guests they interview, listen to what they're saying, and think about what you as an individual could offer this particular podcast. In my case, I didn't actually contact this podcast to go on the podcast. They contacted me. And that was because I was building a personal brand through LinkedIn. I was posting on LinkedIn. I was sharing my story. I was talking about freelancing. I was talking about how I went from a 9-to-5 job to become a freelancer. I was sharing all these details. I was talking about digital nomad life. And so I was building an authority and building an influence in my specific niche, which is digital nomad, freelancing, and now podcasting. So they contacted me. So this video isn't about building a personal brand and putting your story out there. This is about contacting podcasts to get opportunities for yourself. Obviously, there's a different way to do it, which is building a personal brand and attracting opportunities rather than chasing them. But I know from experience that building a personal brand takes time and effort and energy, and it's not easy. So I would recommend building a personal brand anyway, but also chasing these opportunities until you begin to attract them. You've nailed down the niche, the area, the podcasts, follow them, you listen to them, you've heard what they have to say. Think about what you can offer this podcast. As a podcast host myself, I know what I like to hear from people. If they're pitching to me or they want to come on my podcast, I want them to offer solutions to me. I don't want them to be saying, I should be on your podcast, or I like your podcast, or if you ever want a podcast guest, then let me know. Because I don't know anything about you if you're contacting me cold, and I don't know what you can offer me or my audience. I am very specific about who I have on my podcast because I am protecting my audience, my listener, and I respect their time. So as a podcast host, I don't want to have anybody coming on my podcast. They've got to be good and they've got to be offering value, something of value to my audience, whether that's entertainment, whether that's inspiration, or whether that's education. So I would spend some time listening to the podcast and actually following the host. So look for them on social media, look for them on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, wherever they're hanging out. Find them, make comments, interact with them. Don't just send them a random message being like, I love your podcast, I should be on your podcast because I'm great. It's not about that. You need to really build some type of connection with the host first of all. That might be even saying to them, do you want to have a chat? I love your podcasts. I feel like I have some valuable insight, or offer them something like some tips or some feedback or something like this. If someone contacts me and they want to be on my podcast, then what I'm looking for is that they've actually listened to the podcast, that they know it, that they enjoy it, and that they tell me some episodes that they like. So they could be quoting me and saying, I love your podcast, I love the episode with this person, and I loved it when you said this. I thought it was really insightful. I thought it was very interesting, and it helped me do this. So that's an example of a message that you can add value to the podcast host. The next thing you should do is offer something to them. So, like I mentioned before, think about what you can add to their podcast. So, for example, my podcast is about helping lawyers break out of the traditional ways of working and do what they want, live a life they want, whether that's traveling and working, whether that's setting up their own consultancy, whether that's creating their own law firm, whatever it is, whether that's quitting law completely, whatever it is, going for it. I've had someone who contacted me and said, I'm a digital nomad lawyer. I'm doing it. I'm doing exactly what you talk about on your podcast. I travel and work. I think a brilliant topic would be how to get clients when you're on the road, how to adapt to different time zones, how to manage clients, how to set boundaries. And I was like, yes, that is a brilliant topic to talk about. And then they said, let's have a chat. So we have a chat, and I think they're a really good speaker. They've got a really good topic to offer value. Let's go for it and record a podcast. So when you offer solutions to the host, the last thing they want to do is figure out how you can fit in with their podcast and what sort of topic you can talk about. They don't know you. They don't know the intricate details of your life, your experiences. They don't know how you can add value to their podcast without having a conversation with you. And they don't have that much time because they're always recording podcasts. I'm speaking from experience here. They want, as I said a million times, solutions. So when you offer these solutions and ideas, then that's refreshing to them. And you're more likely to get a yes, you can be on my podcast. And by offering that insight, that is how you open the doors to opportunities. Another thing you should do before going on a podcast is to look at the podcast in terms of how many reviews do they have. That often reflects the amount of people who listen. How many people engage with their social media posts about their content? Do they promote their podcast? These are different factors that you want to just consider before going on a podcast, because you don't want it to be a waste of time for you. If the podcast is not being promoted, then it suggests that people aren't really listening, because the only way to get listeners is to promote a podcast. So let's say they have a newsletter. Subscribe to the newsletter and see if they announce new podcasts that are coming out, and just have a real dig deep into the research and look at whether this is a worthwhile opportunity for you. The more podcasts you go on, the more deep conversations you have, the more exposed you are, and the listeners may reach out to you. You may create a really good connection with the host, and they may offer really amazing opportunities for you. Now, I know that when I've had people on my podcast, I am going to be talking at a massive law event. I've actually recommended speakers for that law event due to relationships that I have made through my podcast by interviewing other lawyers. So I have recommended people who've been on my podcast because I know that they're really good talkers and I know that they have really good stories and topics to talk about. So I've recommended these people to a massive legal event that's going on. It's a brilliant way to network, get opportunities, and attract brilliant chances to put yourself out there and do amazing things.